Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. I've talked before about Steven Spielberg, and this will be relevant to The Iron Giant, but previously I've had conversations about how I am a huge fan of Steven Spielberg. Intellectually, of course, he is one of the founding fathers of cinema, and of course, in terms of his adult filmography, I'm much more geared towards films like Munich, like Bridge of Spies. As I've said, the problems I have are more towards his significantly more popular, but child-centric cinema. And it's interesting watching The Iron Giant because, of course, as I was watching it, I was thinking a lot about E.T. Because The Iron Giant, in many ways, is almost a perfect parallel to E.T. in respect of it is about an isolated boy in a small town who has emotional issues for one reason and another, who befriends an extraterrestrial being who is unable to communicate and doesn't know much about our world and has to learn about us, and yet, as the film as it transpires, he has incredible and terrifying powers, and the government wants to capture or destroy it. And that's you see the deep parallels between E.T. and the Iron Giant. And I suppose what's interesting for me is the fact that, because I remember the Iron Giant being released, I remember, because I would have been the appropriate age for when the film came out. And for whatever reason, whether it be something I chose or something that was just being a child was sort of decided for me, I never saw the Iron Giant. This is my first viewing of the film. And consequently, I don't know, it means as I'm watching this, I am pondering whether this is the kind of film I would have liked at the age I was when it came out. And I wonder if I wouldn't have done. And if I didn't, obviously I consider why that is. And of course that then feeds into why the works of Steven Spielberg don't really appeal to me. The primary thing that draws to my attention, of course, there is the fundamental Americana of it all. That sense of this is about small town America and harkens back to, a childhood that these filmmakers had themselves. And if they didn't have it themselves, they create that sense of nostalgia that many young Americans would have gone through. Particularly those who grew up in small towns. And of course, they make the lead identifiable to those who were like outcasts or felt that they were weird in some way, slightly, possibly a bit too geeky or intellectual or too dorky for the sort of normal, quote-unquote, kids around them. And of course, I think that almost definitely applies to Steven Spielberg and Brad Bird. And of course, many people who have gone to the cinema, if they don't directly identify with those leads, they understand them and they relate to that experience, and it opens the empathetic pathway of going, I recognise that child, whether it's within myself or within children that I've known. And so I understand that sense of childish wonderment. And again, the idea that the Iron Giant is obviously symbolic of imagination and of potential, I suppose, and the ability to sort of take your imaginary friend and then be greater and more wondrous than you could could conceive of. And of course, the film ultimately, in that respect, is more about, if you take the whole thing as a metaphor, which the film doesn't lend itself to, but using that lens, you get that sense of I suppose it's about a child trying to interpret the world around them, and the Iron Giant represents, I suppose, an amalgamation of ideas. The idea of, the larger world, the idea of warfare and the consequences of warfare. Of course, the nuclear threat that was hanging over sort of a 50s child, because it was something that was being prepared for. But then also the idea of Superman, and of course the Superman theme is prominent throughout this film. The idea of aspiring to be more like Superman than than a gun, as they say. And of course, so if the Iron Giant is a metaphor, it's a metaphor for all the potential that the child sees in the world, in the wider world, then all the danger, and the idea that the child can see the best within society, within sort of all of these complicated structures that they don't really fully understand, but also the fact that if it goes wrong, it'll be a danger to them and everyone they love. And again, it goes beyond our lead. It goes to, the idea, as I say, about these small towns, because I think there is that sort of recognisable series of characters. The single mum working in a cafe, just trying to sort of keep her house together. The sort of cool, calm and collected guy who's slightly artistic, but also a bit strange, and ultimately isn't living up to his potential, and consequently is, kind of withering away. You have your kooks, and you have your, eccentric characters. You get that sort of sampling of small town America, that sense of, like I say, you might not recognise the characters there, but you recognise the idea of them. The thing that I thought was a shame in The Iron Giant is the fact that I would have liked it as a film to be just about that. And you could have had the military aspect come in, but the thing I didn't like was, what was his name? Lansfield, the agent, coming in, because I understood this film from what I'd heard of it. I'd misunderstood where I thought it was going to go, because I knew the character was there, Cole Lansford or something, and that he is a part of the community, and of course he's trying to investigate and prove the existence of the Iron Giant. But I thought that he was just simply sort of a factor within it, and that yes, he is chasing down this threat, and he symbolises sort of McCarthyism and the sort of looming threat of invasive government and into sort of small town America. But I thought this film was supposed to be without antagonist, and for the most part I thought it was, and that he's there and he's a concern, but he's not the antagonist, until I discovered that he absolutely is the antagonist of the film, and he is the thing that, it isn't just a series of tragic circumstances that leads the Iron Giant to having to confront the military and have his tragic fate, but actually this guy drives that tragedy, and he is sort of, the fact that he's so threatening towards the boy, the fact that he's threatening towards the mother, you get that sense that he is unquestionably the antagonist. And I thought it was a shame, because we've reached a point now where Disney has now creates narratives that don't have straight antagonists. They have minor antagonists and sort of, and obstacles in the form of sort of external threat. But whatever, if you take a film like Moana, it doesn't really have a primary antagonist. It is more just a series of circumstances and forces that the lead has to deal with. The same with Luca. You get that, or Inside Out. It's much more Disney now understands how to be able to tell these much more complex, internalized ideas without needing there to be a like a Duke Orso or a Scar, or having this villain for someone to stop. And I think as much as I do like villains, and I think good villains make good Disney films, I think that having narratives that don't have villains is just as interesting, because of course then the threat comes from within your own decisions and your own sort of personal obstacles. And of course the Iron Giant is not a Disney film, but I thought from when the period in which Iron Giant came out, Disney would definitely was in a villainous period, and I thought the Iron Giant was going to be a film that stood out because of that, and to some degree it does. It does have that sense of, this being a circumstance, and sort of, the idea of fighting against people's desire for war rather than someone who's actually trying to cause war. But as I say, it's not quite as ambiguous and complicated as they do give you. You sort of, this man is the cause of these events, which is a bit of a shame. As I've said at the beginning of this video, I really struggle to identify with that kind of storytelling, and I spent the film pondering why. I do wonder whether it is because I have always, even as a child myself, struggled with child protagonists. Because I never, like our lead, I never really identified with other children, particularly in fiction, and that I always identified with sort of the mature characters, even if they weren't necessarily mature, but from my childish perspective, I never really identified with sort of the child experience. And so therefore, I couldn't quite find my place in the story. I couldn't quite find my way to enter the story. Or would have been the case had I been young enough to watch it. And I do think it's beautiful, and I do think the thing that I think is a shame is that this is a great animation style. I know this is the period in which hand-drawn animation is coming to an end, but I think it's a shame that this didn't sort of expand into its own mini production of hand-drawn animations like Ghibli, or like Secret of Nim, that production company. Because I do think it would have been great to see a period of hand-drawn animation in this style, and there is so much going on here. There's so much, even though it's quite domestic, it's quite simple, there's so much beauty in the local architecture. And again, it draws the Iron Giant in such a way that he contrasts his environment fantastically, in a way that makes him both stand out, but also complement what's around him. And so I do think this is a really sweet-natured film. I do think it is great. I still ponder what I would have missed by not, if I'd seen it at the right time, whether it would have, I don't know, awakened a certain side of my understanding that I didn't have at the time. I mean, again, self-explanatory, very complicated, and it's just one of those things that I was thinking a lot about. The other thing, I suppose, that came to my mind is the fact that rather than, as I've done in this video, draw the line between the Iron Giant and E.T., weirdly, I kept thinking about Kes, David. Isn't it terrible when a director's name has gone out of your head? Sorry? Loach. Ken Loach, that's right. The Ken Loach film. Because again, I don't know, maybe there's something there, and I would love to go back and watch Kes. Because I think the Iron Giant definitely symbolises a boy's hope in the way that Kes symbolises a boy's hope. And there is, of course, the great tragedy. And if that parallel is as strong as I think it is, it means the Iron Giant is much more tragic, because of course Kes thematically is about society crushing a boy's dreams. Although the Iron Giant, of course, I suppose if you think about it, then gives the boy hope, and the idea that the Iron Giant will come back implies the idea of hope never hope persisting. So. But again, I kept thinking about Kes as well whilst I was watching this. and the idea of sort of, symbolising a boy's hope and dreams, and the way that it's being crushed and abused. But unlike Kids, the idea of it being, eternal and rebuilding. So if anything, there was a lot of depth that I wanted to plunder into this film. There's a lot of meaning, and so clearly I have been attaching a great emotional weight to this film, watching it on this viewing, because I've had so much material to consider and think about the themes, about the characters, and I just think that shows the quality of the film itself. That, it can be a child's adventure film that any child could relate to, but have so many themes and ideas that make you sit and think about it. And again, it's such a short film, its running time is so short, and consequently, it shows the achievement of being able to tell this kind of story in this way, and yet have so much meaning to it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below and share the video, because this will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of almost 250 videos. I am quickly falling upon that arbitrary checkpoint. And follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.